Now, please welcome the next panel, which is about European Commission initiative about Digital Services Act, which has the aim of strengthen the single market for digital services and foster innovation and competitiveness of the European online environment. The speaker in the session will discuss the open issues regarding the responsibilities of internet intermediaries and which will be the impact of the digital market on consumers and on the digital market. The speakers will be Andrea Stazzi, Senior Manager, Regulatory Affairs, Lead Italy at Google. Marco Pierani, Director of Public Affairs and Media Relations at Euroconsumers. Orietta Maizza, who works for the Italian Ministry of Development, and Sandro Gozzi, member of the European Parliament. The moderator is Stefano D'Empoli, President of ICOM. Now it's your turn, Stefano. It's up to you. I don't know if they are ready.
I'm here.
For the counterpoint table. Ecco, now I see Stefano D'Empoli.
Okay.
So Stefano, it's up to you.
Ciao.
It's your turn.
Yeah, thanks Giuseppe. And, we have a very distinguished panel of speakers. We are all waiting for this package by the European Commission. Was expected until a few days ago by December 2. Now it seems by December 9. But in any case, it's really widely expected, also because it's the first serious. Maybe it's too much, but certainly the ambition is to reform the e-commerce directive that was approved 20 years ago. So it's of course there were other acts, directives, regulations intervening in this area, but this should be the most ambitious intervention over the last 20 years. And why this intervention? Actually, the first directive was pretty successful in guaranteeing that the e-commerce would benefit the European single market and more in general the European economy. According to several studies, the benefits are close to 2% of the European GDP, European Union GDP, so pretty significant. Of course, over the last 20 years.
Sì, il problema è che spesso guardavo lì allora un po' di profilo, però poi me ne accorgevo e tornavo da voi.
Microphone that is open, but if you can, okay. Over the last 20 years, internet and digital, more in general, changed quite a lot, and with opportunities, we saw also some risks arising. Several kinds of risk, from cybersecurity to hate speech, fake news. Of course, also some copyright issues were raised, and several illegal activities, of course, spread over the internet. So I believe, that benefits still are much larger than costs, but certainly, there is probably time to revise, rules, and trying to adapt rules to the evolution of the time. And in this respect, the Digital Services Act would comprise probably two pillars. This is the intention by the European Commission, unless there is some surprise. We are discussing today one of the two pillars, the pillar that concerns the intermediary responsibilities, and basically the Commission, this is the intention spelled by the same Commission, would propose clear rules framing the responsibilities of digital services to address the risks faced by their users and to protect their rights. Of course, there are several topics that we expect. This pillar to touch, but I would discuss it with the guests. I'm not repeating the presentations, but being the time very short, I'm going to the first questions. I would propose the first question to Andrea Stazzi, and from Google, and I would ask him what principles should the DSA be based on to encourage future innovation and at the same time adequately protect consumers. Please, Andrea.
As to your consumers for this great online event that we can participate in. So it's a very good opportunity to discuss with such distinguished speakers these so complex issues right now. And in particular, regarding your question, Stefano, I think that, first of all, the general goal of the Digital Service Act is crucial. So the general goal of completing the digital single market is fundamental for our as European citizens, all obviously for the companies also, but in general for all of us as Europeans. The key principles that have allowed until now the development of digital services in Europe have been, I think, the country of origin principle, which avoids having to deal with 27 different regulatory frameworks and allow online and so cross-border service providers to operate. The other key principle is the limited liability regime, which comes from the e-commerce directive, and that's essential to ensure freedom of expression and of economic initiative, and encourage how nuance and especially small and medium enterprises, small and medium service providers to operate online and provide internet services by internet, and to foster innovation. So thanks to the digital economy and all the relative benefits that it brings. Along with the limited liability, the prohibition of monitoring obligation, which also has been provided since the e-commerce directive, is crucial to limit, to avoid a different approach. So an obligation of monitoring or monitoring content before that would limit freedom of expression, because the service provider would be forced to filter ex ante the contents, and the risk is that they would overforce, especially even small and medium operators, but that's true for all the operators, to avoid liabilities. And for all of us, the other problem could be that the platforms or the service providers couldn't proceed with human reviews in the most complex cases as it's needed, definitely, right now, because we can't leave to technology all the review of the content in the most difficult cases. Therefore, such a complex issue requires an appropriate balancing of rights. So on one hand, the freedom of expression, the right of the citizens to safety in their online activities, and on the other, obviously, also the freedom of economic initiative. That's the engine behind the digital economy, and that hopefully will allow Europe to grow more and more thanks to digital. That, as we know, it's one of the key priorities for the European Commission. In this perspective, let me also mention that there are some, particular cases, for example, the lawful but harmful contents, which are the most challenging, because in those cases, contextual elements are needed to take the final decisions, and therefore, in such difficult cases, probably the decision shouldn't be left to private operators, and co-regulation is instead a better approach. In fact, for example, YouTube, along with Facebook, Microsoft, and Twitter, are cooperating since a few years with the European Commission on a code of conduct on countering illegal hate speech online. And now, in the fifth evaluation of the code, we see that on average 90% of the notifications are reviewed within 24 hours, and 71% of the content is removed, 80% on YouTube. And therefore, this data shows the effectiveness of co-regulation, and that tools such as code of conduct improve users' experience and takes into account the complexity, the practical complexity of such efforts, of such decision online.
Thanks, Andrea. Marco, what are consumer expectations concerning the DSA, and how, to strike the balance between regulation and innovation?
Thank you, Stefano. How many hours do I have to answer? I think
no more than 4 minutes. Possibly
somebody
less.
gave you this rule. So I believe that consumers respect the innovation and competition, exactly as it was at the turn of the century with the e-commerce directive. As you have remind, at that moment, that legislation, the e-commerce directive, got benefit to consumer coming from technological exploitation. So we cannot fundamental turning point. It is undeniable that the market has changed, that there are dominant positions, and there are daily possible risk of abuse. However, we must escape, this is an important thing, we must escape the risk of regulating the present, giving up to imagining a future. The e-commerce directive imagined the future and accompanied the future. Today, with the DSA, we need to try to do the same. If the regulation that Europe will introduce is based solely and on the existing, we will have a missed opportunity. So we have to, what we expect, you ask what we expect as consumers. We expect that the good aspect of the safe harbors of the e-commerce directive to be preserved. At the same time, we expect that a regulatory ladder will be introduced to take into account the diversity of the roles of the different platforms. We expect more stringent rules depending on the control carried out by the platform on the contents. Because of course, what is clear from the e-commerce directive at the status of the market today is that the one size fits all rule is no longer always the good one. So we need to diversify. This is the only way to offer consumer effective protection. Of course, consumers need to be protected, both when they are passive buyers. Well, we would like consumer never to be passive, but sometimes they have a weak role in the market, and in that case, consumer need to be strongly protected. But consumer need to be protected even when they are active, meaning when they are creator of contents in a non-professional way, but user contents is the engine of also many professional activities and contents that are exploited in the market. Also in this case, consumer need to receive adequate protection. So maybe the 4 minutes are over. Instead, I go for another hour.
Sì, lo so, lo so.
No, yeah. Thanks, Marco. I would leave to Orietta Maizza from the Ministry of Economic Development, and I would ask her if I mean, what's the? Of course, we don't know the the text, even if we saw something that was went out, but what's the position of the Italian government on the platform responsibility? If there is a position already taken, already reached, and which are, in your opinion, the main priorities for the SA from the Italian government perspective? We cannot hear you. Okay.
Good afternoon. Yes. The mic was out. I thank your consumers for inviting the Ministry of Economic Development to this event. And before getting to the point of the question, I would like to highlight a brief consideration. As you were saying, we've been talking of information society, technological development, e-commerce for the last 20 years. But I think that never before we had such a deep understanding of how all these affect and it is part of our lives. The pandemic we are experiencing gives us really a lot of hints and makes us even more responsible for the choices that we'll take. Because more and more people use new tools, devices, have new needs in their daily life. So a great attention must be devoted to consider all the necessary facets that this involves, those with a short-term impact and those with a longer-term impact. The digital services package will cover, as you said, several aspects. But it cannot be considered by itself. It's a part of a broader picture. And I would just remind the parallel efforts that are in the line in this moment. Last week, the European Commission released a new consumer agenda that tackles the challenge of the digital transformation as well, and other recent directives face the problems concerning the digital market and the digital economy. Some of them will be transposed in the next month. I think of the Omnibus Directive that tries to update aspects related to unfair commercial practices, fake or manipulated reviews, transparency of rankings, hidden advertising, and so on. So going back to the main topic, the DSA, the Italian government participated in European consultation for the DSA with the coordination of the European Policies Department within the Prime Minister's office. And the Italian position recognizes the opportunity and the need of updating the regulatory framework in order to keep it up at pace with the technological evolution and springing of new business models. And Italy acknowledges the role and the innovative potential of the big platforms. But as you were saying before, we have to look for the right balance between innovation and benefits that can come from economies of scale, with the prevention of oligopolistic risks, with guaranteeing market accessibility and competition, fair competition on the one hand, and transparency and consumer protection on the other one. And we have to look at the risk that market power can spread over on adjacent markets as well. So we were saying right balance, how? First, by setting principle-based rules that set the aim we want to achieve and draw tools that can be adjusted according to the evolution of the context. Then trying to uniform rules about what is legal online and offline, which means, for instance, contrasting unsafe or counterfeited products online should be as effective, proportionate, and timely as it is offline. So in this context, for instance, we deem as a user those that we are experiencing, like notice and stay down, for example. But I do agree with what Pierani was saying as well. We have to strengthen consumer awareness, which is becoming more and more important and complex and articulated, because it involves many different skills, different kind of knowledge and literacy, and we have to work on consumers' attitudes and habits. So it's not only a matter of digital skills. We have to understand the importance and the value of our personal data. And in this sense, really a big effort we are doing as Ministry of Economic Development in particular. We are really supporting a lot of projects, especially by consumers associations, in order to widespread and increase consumers' awareness in the digital environment. So I think that this is basically what are one of the priorities in this area. And I think that I touched the 4th minute, and I.
Okay. Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Now, Sandro Gozzi, of course, member of the European Parliament, and I would ask you, what are, in your opinion, the most effective principles and tools to deepen the EU internal market and clarify online service providers' responsibilities?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this panel. I find it very interesting. 20 years is too century for the issue we are talking about. We have adopted the e-commerce directive 20 years ago. It is clear that there are some principles that should be confirmed because they are still valid, but it is for several aspects this directive needs to be revised, and we need also a new approach in the light of technological evolution. and also area of the evolution of the market. So from my perspective, we got some key issues to be tackled. The first, the market must be balanced. You got giants, you got gatekeepers who control by far the market, and this doesn't go in the interest of the consumer. So it is clear that you need to adapt the competition law to better tackle actors which have today a big chunk of control of the market. And this should be done through a new regulation on certain issues of free competition and better balanced competition in the single market. That I would say we also need the new regulatory tools to ensure an equal access, which is in the interest of the consumers, and it is also an interest of the market to promote also and to let grow startups that exist in Europe, but they do not occupy a big by the manager of the platform. This principle, in my view, should certainly be strengthened. The third point, because we don't have enough time, it is that we also have to have a very serious look to the issue of harmful content. And this is not only for the consumer, but for the all citizens. From this perspective, you can work on the general condition of use, the contract that is being used for the platform. You can work on the moderation online. You can ask to use the moderation online, working on the virality, working on the content sharing, working on the visibility, to tackle the plague of fake news on one side and of disinformation on the other side. In the life experience of some national laws, take the German one, I think that should be done under also public supervision. And I would say that to strengthen the network of national supervisory authority, but it also go toward the creation of a European authority that as at the center of this new of the network of supervisory national authorities. And of course, this means that, in my view, the code of conduct of 2018 certainly good practice, but it's not enough. We strengthen on certain aspects and more, must go beyond that through a regulatory approach on other aspects. It's going to be a very difficult work that we have to do in the Parliament from the beginning of December. But I think that we are really at the whole heart of a societal issue, which require all the effort possible from our part.
Thanks a lot. There are just few minutes remaining for very short ads. And I would ask to Andrea Stazzi, so no more than 1-2 minutes each, because otherwise we'll be really late. To Andrea Stazzi, I would ask, you spoke before of limited liability as a principle that should be preserved because it's hugely beneficial to a sound digital market. What's the responsibility, in your opinion, between liability and responsibility? Sometimes there is confusion between the two.
Yeah, sure. First, let me just repeat some key points that we definitely agreed. So, in this perspective, to clarify the distinction between liability and responsibility, a broader concept like that, that should be at the center of the commitment of the service providers on the internet, that are not only the platforms. Let's repeat ourselves one more because it's crucial. some speakers said that it's important to recognize the differences between specific services and business. That's crucial. We agreed with Marco in particular on that, and liability shouldn't be imposed without effective knowledge of who does what. And which kind of content is delivered. So not easy takedown approach was effective in that perspective. Disincentive models should be avoided, and legal certainty without unclear definition. Let's think of active versus passive hosting and the jurisprudence on that. While notice formalities could help. What about responsibility? Before that, let me just mention that a recent study by Aligned for Startups and Oxera highlighted how a strict liability regime could cost loss of revenue to small businesses up to 23 billion. So let's work together to have, obviously, we can cooperate, but it's important to preserve all the operators, especially not only I mean, I see the problem of size of the platform, but it's important to preserve the whole environment. Finally, how do we commit to responsibility and not just liability? Basically, we have a comprehensive approach to tackle, in particular, what Mr. Gozzi mentioned, that the controversial content issue, that's crucial. We see perfectly, and we see by experience, for example, with the right to be forgotten, but with the different harmful content, how much it's difficult. How do we work? We, on YouTube in particular, we remove content that violates our policies, first. Second, we raise up authoritative voices when people look for data and information. Let's think of what we did for COVID-19, both on YouTube and Google. Third, we reduce the kind of content that runs right up against our policy line to deal with the harmful but not illegal content for our policies. And finally, we set a higher bar for what channels can, how channels can make money, rewarding trusted and eligible creators. So we try to have an holistic, a comprehensive approach that work on different streamlines with the different content.
Okay, Andrea. We should try to be shorter in the next interventions, and to Marco, what are the most effective and future-proof tools to empower consumers in the digital era? Just, I mean, quote one, maximum two.
Okay, so one thing we have to avoid is to entrust freedom of expression to the arbitration of the individual platform. This we cannot do. Then about enforcement, it's important public enforcement, but also private enforcement. So we need to have a strong class action law in Europe. Third thing, about fact checking. The platform should be open to civil society and consumer organization, and this event here is clear also a path in that direction, to also delegate fact checking to organizations that have in their DNA consumer protection and civil rights.
Thanks, Marco. And to Rita Maizza, how do you envisage oversight mechanism and bodies in a, I mean, between European national level? I mean, do you see some delegation or at least coordination between member states?
Yes, indeed. We don't think that there's need for brand new mechanisms. So where we are experiencing already a good experience of coordination between national regulatory authorities and in different countries with at a European level. So we don't think that there is a need for new authority, but we can work on what is already existing and make it suit for the new challenges. Because as I was saying, there are already a lot of good experiences in several sectors of about cooperation.
Thanks a lot. And then a final word from MEP Sandro Gozzi, please.
Thank you. I mean, of course, I'm very well aware of the difference between service and platform, but there are some responsibility and liability principles that, in my view, could apply to both. And I think that we have to work on the notion of duty of care, which implies a lot of work on the moderation and with the public supervision. We can look at the experience of the German law, at the beginning problematic, but then they found a balance from which we can withdraw some lessons. And also we have to be sure, in the interest of consumer, to introduce obligation of take down and stay down when it comes to illegal content, to ensure an effective protection of consumer. There are basically, I mean, in my view, around this, we could build up a new approach to responsibility and consumer protection.
Thanks a lot. Thanks to everybody, and I would give the floor to Giuseppe De Filippi. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Stefano da Empoli and to all the speakers of his table, of his meeting. And now we have to watch some videos together, and then all of us, and by all of us, I mean really all of us, because it will be transmitted to all the channels, we'll have the pleasure of listening to a very promising exchange of ideas between Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University and the Italian internet pioneer, and as he labels himself, a serial entrepreneur, Stefano Quintarelli. So let's listen together, let's watch together the videos, and then the debate.